The weapons in Sicario, Day of the Soldado, tell a story the plot barely touches, and this movie deserves a lot more credit than it gets. A lot of people wrote it off as a step down, but that's not a fair assessment. Directed by Stefano Sollima, the man behind the widely acclaimed Italian crime series Gomorrah, it's darker and colder than the original in ways that reward attention. The moral compass is gone. There are no heroes, just operators, cartels, and a world where the rules stopped applying a long time ago. The guns reflect that perfectly. And there's one moment in this movie where Benicio del Toro does something unexpected enough that the firearms community still argues about whether it was planned or whether he came up with it on the day. But first, let's start where Alejandro starts. Alejandro is in the field during the kidnapping of Isabel Reyes. Ski mask on, identity hidden, Smith & Wesson 910 in hand. The 910 is a no-frills Smith & Wesson from 1995, built as a cut-price version of their 59 series pistols. The name says exactly what it is: 9mm, 10 rounds. A design forced into existence by the 1994 federal assault weapons ban, which capped magazine capacity and got that limit written into the gun's name. To keep costs down, Smith & Wesson replaced the metal guide rod and magazine release with plastic, and the finish on the slide is rougher than anything in the premium range. It was discontinued in the mid-2000s. Israeli police departments kept using them long after American departments had moved to Glocks. Surplus units with Israeli markings still show up on the secondhand market. Alejandro running this gun during a covert kidnapping is subtle but deliberate. A worn workhorse with no flash, doing its job without drawing any attention. The kidnapping goes to plan. Getting Isabel out of federal custody is a different problem, and the gun Alejandro picks for that job is practically a federal ID card. Going undercover as a DEA agent, Alejandro carries a Sig Sauer P228. The fit makes sense. The P228 was the actual standard issue pistol of the DEA through most of the 1990s. It came out in 1988 as a more compact version of the P226, and the US military adopted it as the M11, issuing it to pilots, investigators, and personnel who needed something smaller than the standard issue Beretta M9. SIG stopped making it when the P229 came along. With a stronger slide, capable of handling higher pressure rounds, the P228 couldn't safely fire. You can spot an original P228 by its rounded trigger guard and folded steel slide. On screen, Alejandro holding one doesn't get a second look from the agents around him. That's the whole game. The undercover play falls apart. When the shooting starts, Matt Graver reaches for something built to win a fight. Graver, played by Josh Brolin, carries a Daniel Defense DD-M4, set up as an M4A1 for the whole movie. Daniel Defense started out making rails, not rifles. In 2003, they won a $20 million US SOCOM contract to supply rails for M4 carbines, beating out Knight's armament to get it. That contract put them in business at the highest level. What most people don't know is how close it never came to happening at all. To fund the bid, founder Marty Daniels' father put up the family's fourth-generation farm as collateral for a $250,000 loan. A small company with no track record, betting the literal family farm against the biggest names in the defense industry, and winning. By 2009, they were building complete rifles, and the DD-M4A1 came with a cold hammer-forged barrel and the RIS-2 rail system that U.S. Special Operations Command has used since 2005. The gun changed. So did everything around it. Graver holds the line up close. When the team needs to stop a moving vehicle from a helicopter with one shot, they bring something built for a completely different kind of work. An operative uses an HK-417 with a scope and a brass catcher during the helicopter chase, putting a single round through a windshield to kill the driver and end the pursuit. The 417 is the bigger brother of the HK-416. Same basic platform, but built around the full-power 7.62 by 51 mm NATO round instead of the lighter 5.56. It came out in 2005, built on lessons from Afghanistan and Iraq, where soldiers found that the 5.56 round wasn't always enough to punch through cover or reach the distances they needed. It runs the same short-stroke gas piston system as the 416, which keeps the propellant gas away from the working parts and keeps the gun cleaner for longer. JSOC, DevGru, and the German Bundeswehr all use it. It comes in 3 barrel lengths: 12-inch assaulter, 16-inch recce, and 20-inch sniper. The U.S. Army adopted the platform as the basis for the M110A1 squad-designated marksman rifle in 2019. In the movie, 1 round is all it takes. 1 shot from the air ends the chase. On the ground, one of Matt's own guys is running a rifle that was supposed to replace the M4 and never got the chance. Troy carries a Remington ACR during the convoy ambush. It didn't start out as a Remington. It began as the Magpul Masada, put together in 5 months, named after the ancient hilltop fortress where Jewish fighters chose to die rather than surrender to Rome, and shown off at the 2007 SHOT Show as a serious attempt to replace the M16 family. Magpul handed the design to Bushmaster in 2008, and Remington took on the military version. The ACR pulled ideas from several platforms: the gas system from the AR-18, the upper receiver from the FN SCAR, the polymer construction from the HKG-36, and it could switch calibers by swapping the barrel, bolt, and magazine at the user level. It went into the Army's competition to replace the M4. The competition was canceled in 2013. The contract never came. Remington went bankrupt in 2018. The ACR now lives in the "what could have been" file. When the ground gets close and the spaces get tight, the HK family has 2 very different answers. Matt's team runs a Heckler & Koch MP5A3 during the kidnapping of Isabel, the same submachine gun that made Alejandro's gun one of the most recognizable weapons in the original Sicario. The MP5 goes back to 1964, when HK built it off the same roller-delayed system used in their G3 battle rifle. German border police adopted it in 1966, and the A3 variant came in 1970 with its folding metal stock. The moment that made it famous happened in 1980, when SAS soldiers carried MP5s into the Iranian embassy in London, live on British television in front of millions of viewers, and ended a 6-day hostage situation in under 20 minutes. That footage turned the MP5 into the world's most recognized counterterrorism weapon overnight. It has since been adopted by more than 40 countries. Whoever is holding it doesn't operate under rules that apply to anyone else. For something smaller, something that fits under a jacket and still puts rounds downrange fast, HK built a very different version of the same gun. The MP5K shows up with Alejandro's handlers, K for Kurz, the German word for short. It came out in 1976 after a specific request from forces who needed a close-quarters weapon for operations in South America. It has no stock, a 4.5-inch barrel, a built-in foregrip, and a faster rate of fire than the full-size MP5, 900 rounds per minute against 800, because the lighter bolt cycles quicker. HK also made a version built to fire from inside a briefcase, a real product, sold commercially to protection teams, with the trigger mechanism built into the handle and a firing port cut through the side of the case. At under 13 inches long, the MP5K is about as small as a submachine gun gets, while still being genuinely controllable. When Miguel Hernandez is handed a weapon, what he receives lands with a weight that nothing else in this movie comes close to. Miguel, the teenage boy at the center of the movie's darkest thread, is handed a Sauer P226 TACOPS, an upgraded version with a threaded barrel, a rail, and a 20-round magazine. The P226 has a history worth knowing. It went head-to-head with the Beretta 92 FS in the U.S. Army's competition to replace the M1911, and it lost. Not on performance, but because Beretta's total procurement package came in lower. The Navy SEALs later adopted it on their own terms as the Mark 25, after Beretta M9 slide failures injured several operators and pushed the command to find something else. The TACOPS takes that already capable platform and adds everything an operator could want. When Alejandro needs to hold off an ambush from inside a moving vehicle, he needs something that hits harder and lasts longer. Alejandro runs a Heckler & Koch UMP during the prisoner transport ambush, reloading it inside a Humvee while the firefight builds around him. The UMP, Universal Machine Pistol in German, came out around 2000 as HK's attempt to build a cheaper, lighter replacement for the MP5. The MP5's roller delayed system is precise and controllable, but expensive to make. The UMP uses a simpler blowback system that costs less to produce, though it's harder to keep on target in full auto, which is why HK slowed the rate of fire down to around 600 rounds per minute to keep it manageable. The UMP-45 was aimed squarely at the American law enforcement market, in .45 ACP, a caliber the MP5 was never built for. U.S. Customs and Border Protection adopted it. Canada and Brazil followed. The MP5 outsold it anyway. In Day of the Soldado, the UMP is the weapon of a man with no base, no support, and no clear way out. What Matt's team member carries has a history far older and far more tangled. One that winds through Vietnam, Afghanistan, and ends up in a Hollywood prop warehouse. One of Graver's fighters uses a Type 56, China's folding stock version of the Kalashnikov, built under Soviet license from 1956. China started with Soviet tooling and milled receiver AK-47 copies, then switched to stamped receivers in the mid-1960s, making the Type 56 China's equivalent of the Soviet AKMS. The easiest way to spot one is the front sight, fully enclosed in a hood, a feature found on no other AK pattern rifle. China exported the Type 56 to communist forces across Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East throughout the Cold War. American soldiers in Vietnam ran into Chinese Type 56s more often than genuine Soviet AK-47s. In the 1980s, China sent Type 56s to the Afghan Mujahideen fighting Soviet troops, while at the same time flooding the American civilian market with semi-auto versions, in such numbers that most Hollywood prop houses still have dozens of them. But what Alejandro does with his pistol is something neither the cartel nor the audience expects. During the hit on a high-ranking cartel lawyer, Alejandro pulls off his mask to deliberately reveal his face, steps up, and empties his Beretta 92 FS using his left index finger to rapidly pull the trigger. The 92 FS is a completely standard 9mm pistol with a 15-round magazine and a cold, hammer-forged barrel, the U.S. military's M9, carried in every American conflict from Grenada to Afghanistan for over 30 years. It was Benicio del Toro's own idea. The movie's military technical advisor confirmed it. The goal was to make the hit look messy, to make it read like gang-style street violence and take any clean attribution off the table. Alejandro wants the hit to look like cartel violence, sloppy, imprecise, the kind of chaos that points nowhere. That's precisely why he chose it. That's the arsenal of Sicario. Day of the Soldado, 11 weapons, one deeply underrated movie, and a director who knew that the gun a character carries is never just a gun. If you want more breakdowns like this one, hit subscribe and check out this video right here.